Welcome, pal, to Trauma Informed Care. My name is Joria Larrier once again, and I will be your presenter for today. Let's begin. Trauma Informed Care Practice. I've actually delivered this a little while ago. So, just before we sort of hop into it, who we are Talawa Turf International. We work with schools and Head Starts, early care community, social service and organizations, churches and other religious organizations, and other corporations. We provide services for those folks who provide services to the little people and the families who love them. Well, there is a lot of things for us to do today, and we're going to get started. Some of you already know who I am. You're going to get a copy of this at the end of the training today. But my heart and mind and soul and all of my work for the past 30 plus years has been in education, from infants and toddlers, family daycare, center-based care, parochial care, city, state, federally funded care, Department of Education, and also higher education training. So let's just take a look at our agenda for the day. Of course, we've just engaged in some welcome and some introductions. Rules of engagement, realistically, there again are going to be moments where I will ask questions, or we may have a moment of like some breakout space in order to discuss some case study work, and how currently we may be thinking about what we have in our toolbox already to support children and families and even our community partners who are impacted, but specifically the children that we care for in our Head Start programs. And even again, like to hold space for each other because we have all been impacted. And so, what is trauma? What is trauma informed care? We're going to do some defining of trauma, some effects of trauma, and point out that educators have resiliency building superpowers. Trauma informed care in daily practice, 5 key principles. And then we're going to take a look at some case studies. And again, I'm going to pause throughout this in order to hear some reflective moments from from you. So let's take a look first of all at again our rules of engagement. Yes, we are learning communities. Yes, we have, we already come to the conversation with ideas and influences and impact on the things that we see around us because we live it. But we as an educational learning community, we also add to that uh, the theories and tools, and some people may say tips and tricks that we learn along the way that probably are not taught in textbooks or in let's say higher education training classes, and some things that are like, listen, this makes common sense. There's a phrase, make it make sense. And so some of the things that we just know as being careful, caring human beings, in addition to our theories, that we have to incorporate our responses to caring situations have to make sense, right? And so we're going to definitely, during this period, if you're listening and you're participating, of course you do, we have given you the allowability, if you will, or the permission to unmute yourself at appropriate times. And so of let's use due diligence to do so. So again, if anything that comes to mind, if you have any questions or burning moments that you want to share, you can drop them in chat until there's a time where there's like a free space for dialogue. So here are our objectives. So we're going to list key facets of trauma as a method of demonstrating and understanding the definition of the term trauma. Discuss the impact that trauma has on development. Articulate the definition of trauma-informed care, and examine and apply specific strategies to use in early learning environments to support children as they deal with traumatic experiences. Now, I'm just going to pause just from the beginning. Unfortunately, this word has literally been thrown around, not thrown around lightly, because it does carry heavy weight. Pausing for a moment to name what it is crucial. It is crucial. We will see additional manifestations. Some will call them behaviors. Some will say acting out. Some will say acting up. The stuff that we have seen prior to 2020 could have very well just been given the term, oh, this is what is developmentally expected. Children may be, raising their voice. They may be striking out. They may be snatching things. They may be, very emotional. I'm trying to use very, not really neutral terms, but let's say tactful terms that don't sort of point fingers. And they may be exhibiting these or having these manifestations, and we would say, oh well, they're two, and so they snatch or they bite or they scratch or they cry. But now, with this additional level of experience, there are many people, whether they just be the parent, or they may be a counselor, or they may be a therapist, or they may be a behavioral management specialist, and they will say this behavior may not necessarily just be because they are two or three or four, but it could also be a reaction to the things that are going on around us. And so I'm pausing at the moment at the beginning to say we can now name some of these behaviors or some of these actions as a result of the things that the children have seen, experienced, heard, witnessed, felt, or not felt over the past few months. I just wanted to give a moment for that. Okay. So, and if some of you have seen some of this work before or in some pieces, having a moment to sort of take a look at it again, or in a different light, or in a compilation, is good, just to not just to refresh your mind, but to sort of say, now that we've been through, let's say, a summer or a few months, with the additional things of now people are going back into the building in greater droves, or they are, so many more people are coming out, and therefore children who usually are, and if you think differently, please, please, please drop in the chat, or if you want to turn a mic on and add a piece to this. Children, especially our early care world, or our pre-K, our ones or twos or threes, a lot of times they are the afterthought. They can be considered the afterthought. The adults plan for themselves, and then the children are sort of wrapped into it. Of course, in Head Start, we're trying to focus on the child and the family, sort of in concert. But in the big world, it's, oh, let's get the these children, now that it's September, let's get these children back into school, or even for childcare, let's get the children back into childcare. Not necessarily. And if you differ in this, please, turn your mic on, add into the conversation. The thinking is, oh, let's get the children back into a building. More of the reality is the family has to go to work, so children have to go into care. And I'm pausing purposefully. If you think differently, please share. If you agree, please share. I'd love to just know what thoughts are. Again, the government is, let's get back to business. Well, if we get back to business and people go back to work, the children have to be cared for. Well, that's where our childcare programs come from. Are our buildings, as everyone has a question, is our building safe? They have their, we have our protocols on paper, and then we're incorporating them into our daily practices. And I know, I actually see that there are our staff, like our staff in terms of food services, our staff in terms of custodial staff. So everybody really is in this conversation. Everybody who sees children walking up and down the halls, or if they pop into the classroom, or if they're going out, dealing with the being fed, or if our custodial staff, of course, is doing like the pre-cleaning at the beginning of the day, and then maybe some midday cleaning, or at least refreshing of the sanitary containers, and all of that. Everyone is now walking around with like a different level of their eyes are open a little bit more. So I'm actually gonna I think I'm gonna just pass on this slide of the let's chat. But I want to bring up one story for me, and if you have a story, please let's add this into it. There's a story that pops into my head of stirring up emotions about children and family relationships. May sound a little odd, but the story is Are You My Mother? If you know that story, I cannot see the chat at this moment. So if you want to just turn your mic on and say, if yes, you know the story, or you don't know the story, someone please turn a mic on. The story is called Are You My Mother by P.D. Eastman. Is anyone familiar with that story?
Yes.
Story where the chicken, as a chick was looking for.
Yeah, it's a bird. It's a little baby bird.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Good, because I thought I was alone here. Excellent. Thank you. So that's a story that pops into my head about this. Now, if you know anything about the story, if you know anything about the story, say what you know about the story as it could pertain to emotions about their connections to their caregiver.
I mean, Bird was, the little chick was looking for his mom. So I guess the kids are looking to have connection with someone like their mother, I guess.
Okay. Good. Anyone want to add on?
When the bird was born, the first animal that he saw, he thought that was his mother.
Right. Excellent. Who else wants to add on to that? This is beautiful. It's like a story sequence. So what happens next?
I was gonna say, because the egg cracked when the mother wasn't there, so the little boy didn't know who was the mother.
Right.
The mother wasn't there, so she didn't. The boy didn't have feelings for the mother, so was looking for the mother and asking all the animals, to see, because if the mother's not there, you don't know who's the mother.
Right. Excellent. This story is going very well. Okay, so what happens next? Somebody else pop in. What happens next?
He was even looking at vehicles like the big front end loaders and so on, and thinking that maybe that is his mother too. So it's not only animals he was looking at, he was also looking at vehicles. And so
You're right. So now let's connect this to what was happening right now. When that bird popped out of the shell and did not see the mom, what did the child feel? Or what did the baby bird feel?
Lost and alone.
And they at that moment were experiencing, what's the big T word for today? Trauma. Yep, they were experiencing trauma. So if we possibly put ourselves into a situation similar to that. I have my own story of I'm a Brooklyn girl, Brooklyn born and bred, and who knows the shopping mall Kings Plaza?
Of course.
Everybody. Yeah.
Okay. Well, some people may be from somewhere else, but Kings Plaza is where I grew up on Saturdays with my mom, and that was a big thing to take the bus, the 41, all the way down to Kings Plaza. Well, you probably know where this is going. I'm in the store, I'm in the shopping mall. Of course, mom goes through the aisles and she says, "Come on, make sure you stay near me." And what do you think happens? I blink, I turn around, I'm looking at the floor, and she may step in the other direction, and I'm in the middle. Probably, if y'all know me, all the rocks are really tight. and I usually like to play underneath the rack. So, play underneath the rack, you can't see anything. So of course I come out and I don't see my mother. And I'm thinking she walked out the store. Now, if you walk out of Macy's on a Saturday afternoon, there's thousands of people in there. And of course, your mother always says, what? Stay right next to me or stay where I tell you. I go out, I don't see her. Of course, I start crying. Oh, where are you? And of course, she then comes up and she's like, well, why are you here? Well, I thought you left me. Well, I'm not going to leave you. But there was a moment of trauma. And I mean, of course, still to this day, it sort of pops into my mind of, hey, as best as possible, I want to be that close to my caregiver, right? The bird wants to be as close to the caregiver, but the caregiver has to do something at the moment, and they need to. So they need to do something. Well, they finally like, well, no, I'm your mother, I'm your caregiver. So let's transfer this to here. When these babies, and I'm saying babies, but as our young children come into our buildings now, if they have already been with us for a while, then that's good. We already have the relationship with them. But if some of them are new and are coming in, they are doing what? They are leaving their families, of course. And we all know this, but it's good to have it said. It's good to have it said, just like your doctor says, drink water, drink water, drink water, drink water, drink water. And then you're dehydrated and someone else says drink water and you're like, oh, really? I should do that? Right. Children are gonna come into our spaces and they're going to be exhibiting something. And so that general crying or that general sort of fidgetiness or clinging or not clinging and like being assertive, um, because the household, right, the household and the community and society has been sort of on edge. So I just want us to be cognizant, of course, and you probably already are, I'm sure you already are because you're experiencing it, but just to say, hey, let me hold a little space, or let me give like an additional high five, or let me put my shoulder a little bit closer, because I know we're trying to be relatively as distant, yet we're in childcare, so it's kind of difficult. Maybe give an extra shoulder or an extra little pound with it, however we're going to do that. But just know that the emotions that the children, we have already had either experiences through books, and maybe there are some books that we can pull out that are have more social and emotional perspective, so the children, at least through literature, can say, yes, this is a feeling, and there is a caregiver, and the caregiver right now may not be my parents, my grandparents, my aunt, uncle, my caregivers at home, but we are, of course, the additional caregivers who will be there for them. So now let's take this into trauma-informed care, the systematic approach to understanding and responding child trauma. The goal of trauma-informed care is to build resilience, but the frame is build resilience. If the child is crying, we say, hey, I'm here. You don't have to cry. It's not going to stop in the 2 seconds after. And we're trying to build an additional level of resilience. So that's going to take a little bit more time. So again, let's just be, and I'm saying it for myself, and so we've already experienced some of the time of building an additional level of trust with our families so that they can leave their children. And some families, of course, have been like, hey, good, I'm glad you're back open, hey, I gotta go to work. But there are going to be some of those families who are like, listen, like now with this this new strain, oh, and whatever the protocol is for families coming to the door or coming to the door of the building, whoever those greeters are, because I'm sure some teachers are probably in their classrooms waiting for their children. I don't really know what the protocol is for your sites. But if there's a greeter at that door, then if the greeter is not the child's teacher, right? That greeter has to have the additional level of the smile, the additional, mom, it'll be okay. We'll be fine. We'll call you. Our kitchen staff, our custodial staff, our administrative team, everyone through a mask or maybe through the shield, the eyes that we give, or the head nod, or the tilt to the of the head to the side, or the slight gesture of the bow, letting them know, especially if you're fully masked, we're here. We're here. We may not be the actual mother, but we can be, or the actual parent, but we can and we are the additional caregivers. So as in children, by helping them to recognize and respond appropriately to their own emotions. Think back to the story we talked about in the first P2P discussion, which was the book on Are You My Mother? So let's take a look at defining the trauma. When an event, a series of events or set of circumstances occurs and the one experiencing it perceives the occurrence as physically, emotionally harmful, or life-threatening, is overwhelmed by it, so it affects their ability to cope, and the experience results in negative consequences for their mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. This is described as a trauma. In addition to what we're currently experiencing, I would love for someone, because again, I cannot see the chat, I would love for someone to sort of pop on and just say, what are some examples of trauma that children you serve experience on a daily basis?
The separation of separating from their parents.
Yes, separating from parents, right? What else?
Can it be at home or in school?
It could be whatever you see, whatever you hear about, whatever you are aware of. Yes, so add on.
Probably separation of parents.
Mm-hmm.
Homelessness.
Homelessness. Oh, so you know what? Let me back up. The person who just said separation of parents. So the first person said separating like from the parents, and then the second person separation of parents. So yes, there is a strain, and the child does feel and see, especially if they hear and maybe elevated voices, let's say, or they see the shifting or of time on task, if you will, of one parent in the home. Um, so yes, that's a different separation of with parents. I'm
What
sorry.
about violence in their community?
Say it one more time.
Violence in the community?
Yes, violence in the community. Yeah, because it's
Death.
people here, right? Death. Yep.
Death.
Yeah, I'm always very interested when in some families that how children are informed about the transitioning of someone in their family. Uh, thank God that there's more literature now to share with children, and it is usually the child care program or the school that will have access to these texts that should be on hand, of when someone passes away. I know some of the earlier texts that I was aware of in the early days, it was the passing of a pet, like like my pet fish, my pet goldfish passed away, in order to help children try to connect that. Of course, we're talking about a fish, but it's to soften the hurt, or to at least provide some relevance when an actual adult does pass away. So if you don't already have some of those texts, please hop onto Google University and find some of these texts, because yeah, the children are going to be processing a lot. And if you hear, or of course know through your family community partnership team or your parent advocates, or if the parents share, I'm sure Pal has a central library or something that snatch one of these books or have it in the class, because we're going to be needing to do some different types of read alouds, so the children can just at least listen. They don't necessarily have to respond, or we don't have to say, hey, I know that so and so happened, let me read you this book. But of course, reading the text so that they are hearing it in general. Then when it is time for them to recall it, and they will, some of them will, they can say, oh, at least I've been informed. So thank you for
sharing. My kids were traumatized when we had fire drills. The sound of the fire alarm traumatized them. So that's also something that we need to consider.
Yes. Thank you so much. Like that is just like a regular everyday kind of thing, right? And I'm saying regular everyday because let's say again, prior to 2020, when we would add on the additional, and I know Pal does it as well, like the lockdown drills, right? Or the what's the other one called? The shelter in place drills. All the children knew was, okay, wait, when I see the light go off or on, or when I hear my teacher say X, Y, or Z, I have to go run into the corner, right? Or we have to sit quietly. And then, but she goes to, or he or my teacher goes to run to lock the door and pull the blinds down or something like that, or pull the curtains closed. And we have to be absolutely still. We don't do that at home. We don't do those things at home. So being in school and then hearing that, and then the most loud, of course, is the fire drill. Now I know it's supposed to be, unannounced, but even I, when I was a child care teacher and director, of course, I would go around to those classrooms where I knew that some children were very, very sensitive to sound. To do what? You give the head nod, right? Who knows what I'm talking about? You give the head nod, you give the wink, you give the high sign that says, we're about to have a drill. So just, get that young boy or that young girl who and just sort of put him next to you right away, or just whisper in there, whatever you need to do. Because right, in the real situation, when it happens, it happens. But of course, you want to try to prep your children, as we try as early as possible in childcare, to give them that little clue that when they hear this sound, yes, it may be loud, but what do? I would tell my students all the time, when you hear this sound, you look at me. You look at me, or you look at the adult in the room, and then you follow the protocol. You find your partner's hand, you get on your rug spot, or you get on your walking spot, and we're going to go. But you look at who? The person who's supposed to be the caregiver. So these are excellent examples of the trauma. And of course, we're trying to solidify in the child's mind, we are that person who's going to be their backbone. We are that person who's going to be their caregiver.
Can I ask a question?
Of course. Yes, ma'am.
Is anxiety a part of the trauma too, or is that an effect of the trauma?
So the anxiety, clinically, the anxiety could be, it's usually the manifestation of the trauma. When people are anxious, and let's not just talk about children. So let's talk about adults, because realistically, we're in this together. We really are. we're just the bigger young people. So when people have anxiety about something, that something is and there's actually going to be a slide in it coming up soon, but I'll just share it now. That thing, whatever that thing is, sends a chemical message into the body of the person that makes them react in a way that to other people looks different, and to the individual shifts their thinking, shifts their movements, shifts their understanding, and shifts their reaction. I'm going to take something very simple. You may not think it's anxiety laden, but when certain people eat certain foods that they know they're allergic to, let's just say someone's allergic to shellfish. I'll keep it simple. You're allergic to shellfish. You happen to eat something, you weren't sure that it had shellfish in it, but it has shellfish. And let's say your reaction to it is that, you have anaphylaxis, your throat starts to close up, you have breathing issues. That trigger sends a chemical reaction into your body. Your brain gets wind of it. You're recognizing that now it's difficult to breathe. What are you now feeling?
Anxiety.
You're feeling anxiety. So what some of the things that your body starts doing, and if you've ever seen this, because I've seen it, the person starts doing what? Take a guess. What are some of the things that the person might start doing?
Panicking.
Right, they're panicking. They are
Breathing hard.
Right, they're breathing hard. And some people will say, "Oh my goodness, they're having a what? An anxiety attack." Right? They may be breathing hard. Their eyes are wide open because they realize, they may be waving their hands or stomping their feet, and you're looking like what happened? Oh, but then you realize probably what happened. But that may be one little example. But there are other things that are triggering to people that cause anxiety. It could be time. It could be that they're late for something, and they don't like being late. It could be that their clothes aren't ironed very as the way they need it to be. Now, some people may be like, child, you know what? That is not a big deal. It may not be a big deal to you, but if it's that, if it is the thing that makes that person comfortable and feel at peace and feel okay, then we have to honor that. And I'm saying that um, because I've seen this in a lot of children. So here it is, perfect example. I've taught a number of different grades. I taught kindergarten 1 year, and this little boy comes in, and he's so articulate. He's so articulate. Oh my goodness, so articulate. And you're looking at him like, I cannot believe you're 5. I had my ears perked up because I'm like, ooh, this is going to be interesting. Because I sensed something. He comes and he says, hello. Now, again, he's basically like 4'10". So his birthday was like in November. And so he's like, I told him my name. He goes, hello, Miss Larrier. Let's just say his name is Henry. I'm Henry. I'm Henry, or whatever his last name was. And I'm going to be 5. I have my book bag here. And you're trying, as lovingly as it sounds, you're trying not to laugh. You're not making fun, but you don't really hear 4-year-olds speak so eloquently with their D's and their T's so finite. And I was like, wow, where did he grow up? No problem. And he sits, and it's almost like looking, who knows The Odd Couple? Who knows the show The Odd Couple? With Felix Unger and Oscar Madison.
Oscar Madison,
right.
Yes.
So he was the Felix Unger. He literally took the pencil case out and put it very like what's the word? Sort of catty corner to the corner of the desk. The moment that I saw that, I said, oh my goodness, this is gonna be interesting. Takes the book bag, and this is again, he's a 4.5-year-old, 4'9". Puts the book bag on the back of the chair, the book bag slips off, and he's like, oh, my book bag fell. I said, oh, wow, okay. What really set this to another level is I said, you know what? I have a feeling. And when the other children get in the room, and they're speaking, and he looks around and he's like, they're talking loud. And I said, wow, if you are sort of triggered by this, I wonder what the loudspeaker is going to sound like. Loudspeaker comes on, the principal speaks, and he's like, oh, that's too loud. I said, oh boy, here we go. And I knew what was going to happen. When I knew that there was a fire drill, I said, hey, Henry, there's going to be a really loud sound. I just want you to let you know that I'm right here. I was on the other side of the room, so I couldn't get to him. As soon as he heard it, what do you think he did?
He ran to you?
Covered his ears.
Somebody
Screaming.
Right. So he
got scared.
He did cover his ears. He was frozen. He couldn't figure out what that sound was because he never heard it before. He covered his ears. He closed his eyes really tight as if someone was screaming over him. And he put his head down and he started to cry. He was having, at that moment, what?
Panic attack.
Having an
Anxiety attack.
Now, of course, as we're supposed to be doing what? What are we supposed to be doing at that moment? Getting online, getting our spot, doing all those things. I basically had to pick him up. Thank God he was only 4'9" and I could pick him up because he would not. He was like, I can't go because he didn't know what to do. And so some people may say, boy, if you don't get up, we got to go. But what does that response of the adult do for the child?
Makes it worse.
It makes it worse. Like right now we have this phrase holding space. If you haven't heard it before, it's like this big thing in sort of social emotional learning. To hold space for someone means to allow them to have their moment and to acknowledge that it's okay to have their moment. And I'm not going to put you down. I'm not going to say that, oh, you shouldn't feel like that. No, everyone has the right to feel what they feel. With children, if we don't do it for children, children then grow up doing what? Being silent and having these silent pains, which then turn into a lot of awkward and harmful things later on in life because they feel, what do you think they feel? If their early caregivers, if their family doesn't give them the space to feel and to figure out what those feelings are, what do you think that does?
They feel alone.
That and then some. What else could it, what can anybody think of, like people that you see that are adults now? I'll give you a hint. There are lots of movies. Lots of movies.
The children they're not able to express themselves.
Right. And if they don't express themselves in safe ways, what are some of
They
the
do
things that happen?
they do other things to get that attention.
Right. And
Antisocial,
then they self-harm.
self-harm,
Seeking attention from other people, whether it be people in their own gender or people of other genders. They start to use substances to pacify themselves. They start to seek for attention and approval from other groups of people. Am I ringing some bells right now?
Yep.
Yes, somebody said suicide.
Yeah. Hey, and it's a very touchy subject. I'm very thankful. Again, I can't see the chat. It's a very touchy subject, and it's very unfortunate that that word is now not just connected to adults. It is a very touchy subject, but there are the age of people who I'm just looking for the best word, who engage in that moment is becoming younger. And so self-harm, if a trauma is not addressed or at least given voice or given the space to say, I see that you're not feeling comfortable right now. Of course, with our littles, they don't have the words, and it's important for us to give them the words. So by the time they hit, let's say, public school, elementary school, at least they have words that they can use. And I think we're doing a greater job in these past like 10 years with social and emotional learning of, for us as adults, identifying the words, which we probably were not given when we were younger. It was basically, it was, you upset, get over it, move on. But moving on usually means like forget about it, and it doesn't really get forgotten about. So we're gonna move into we have good time. We're gonna move into a little bit of a breakout room, and I'm going to shift back to looking at you for a moment, and I'm gonna break us out into a situation. What are some of the responses you have had to it? What I think I want us to focus on, I see the first bullet point. What I want us to focus on, because I think we're processing this now, but with the group to think of 5 ways that you've responded to a recent trauma and strategies you use or are interested in using to cope. Now, based on what I just shared right now, hopefully I've at least opened the door a little bit for, by at least by sharing my story or by sharing the story of this book that is common to a number of us, a situation that was a bit traumatic. No matter if the other people around are like, oh, that's not a big deal. No, we should not. At this point in life, what's a big deal to one person doesn't necessarily have to be a big deal for someone else, but it needs to be acknowledged by someone else. So I'm going to come out of this for a moment so I can break this up into a group. So again, there's going to be a recorder and a reporter for the group. With the group, think about a list of 5 ways that you responded to a trauma and write some strategies that were used if you were given to have a strategy to use them, or knowing what you know now that you're interested in using to either cope for yourself or help someone else cope. I'll give you a perfect example because this still may sound a little muddled. If we think about the passing of a person, no matter what the circumstance was, in the moment you don't realize exactly like what to do because you're in it. But if you are helping someone else who is going through that, what are things that you know from your own personal background, whether it be your family background, your cultural background, your religious background, your spiritual background, whatever, um, that were used, or if you learn things along the way, like after the fact, should the situation happen again, what could you use for yourself either to cope or the other person to cope? Does that sound a little easier to digest? Oops, 1 second. Just trying to come out of this. Where? Okay. So let's see. We have, hey, we have a wonderful, wonderful. I'm going to put us into 5. All right, I'm going to put us into a couple of rooms. When you get into the room, it's 11:17. So at 11, let's say 11:30, and that'll give us also a moment if you need to take a little bio break. I tell my students to just say B, if you have to pop out for a moment to, refresh yourself, we just say BRB, a little bio break, and then you will pop into that room. Think of something that has been traumatic, and it could very well, if you want to use this situation, that's fine. Again, we were in it, and so we didn't necessarily know, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm just trying to, like, what am I listening to the CDC? Am I listening to CNN? Am I listening to my local news station? Am I listening to my politician? Am I listening to my minister, my spiritual organization, like what I should do? I'm listening to my family. But as we're going to continue to see some evidence of this, we kind of know things that work or things that help. How are we going to, what kind of strategies are we going to employ? Okay. So those people that I see, I'm going to send you into these groups. Again, we'll come back at 11:30. When we come back at the 11:30, someone from each group can describe whatever, like decide on one traumatic situation, and then some strategies that will help. Can you type, at least quickly type in the chat, clear? If the direction is clear, someone in the chat, just everyone as quickly as possible, type in clear. Okay, great. All right, we are back from our breakout rooms. We were talking about.
It is here, right up underneath unemployment, PIR positions.
A traumatic situation and then some strategies to help out. So breakout room 1.
Teacher is down there.
Seconds. Let's see what we can get done.
But hold on. So how would I indicate that it's early Head Start teacher?
Karen, mute yourself. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, y'all.
You are gonna have to put yourself on. Take yourself off mute.
Hello, for group 1. Hello, I'm speaking on behalf of group 1.
Oh,
it's Perez.
Let me do this. Who can you actually rename yourself? Do people know how to rename themselves?
Yeah.
If you know how to rename yourself, hold on a moment.
And our scenario for breakout group 1 is the child said, cops came to my house.
Ooh.
Okay, and took my father. So with that scenario in place, we came up, our team, our group came up with these 5 strategies to use in the classroom if that child came to school with this Okay, so the first one is by Miss Ardesia. She said, talk to the child, allow him to calm down. I guess give him that space to talk about it, not interrupt his recount of the incident. Secondly, call the parent, and this was suggested by Ms. Rudder, that the parent develop a dialogue with the parent, ask the parent, what happened? Johnny came to school and said X, Y, and Z, what's going on? And where you can learn more that way. 3, play therapy was suggested by Miss Brina Costa, which would be a good way for, the child to kind of like, I guess, get it out, let it out in that way, give him the like the figurines, the different people. We have a set of people in most of our classrooms, in every classroom, where the children are able to recount and reenact whatever happened through play. Another idea which was offered by Miss Beverly Smith was to talk about allow the children, this is an opportunity to discuss what police do in the community, how, what their job description is in all aspects. That, the cops do arrest people. However, their job is to help the community and try to put a positive spin on what police do and what their actual job is. And we also had a suggestion by Ms. Smith to invite a police officer in uniform, because they are part of our community, to have a discussion with the children, to talk about what police do in the community. Again, to put a positive spin on something that can be very traumatic and negative. And lastly was my offering, Ms. Perez, to assure the child that his father didn't do anything wrong to cause what happened. I think that's very important, because oftentimes police may may come to a home in error, and no one in that house was was the target, wasn't the the perpetrator, and it was done in error. We see that every day in our community, and it's very important to assure that child that his father is still his father, and he didn't do anything wrong, because we're not the judge, the jury, or the executioner in this, and that all things must go through a process. And that's where we ended with our strategies.
Let me give a snap it up. Usually I say high five in the camera. High five in the camera.
I didn't do it by myself. We had a great team of great workers, great people in my team. I charge it to the team.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
I'm gonna take a step back, and I'm gonna show my age at this moment. Now, I grew up in a household, and I have a feeling some of the people in the room grew up in a household that you heard this in your family.
Mm-hmm.
Our stuff don't go in the street.
Yeah.
Or it sounded like this. What happens in this household stays in this household.
Stays in this household. That's right.
Or don't be having people walk in my house.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Right. So in theory, some of those ideas are textbook responses. I am always going to play the other side. Mm-hmm. Because I think back in the day, let's say those would be the textbook responses. And let's just say the textbook responses don't necessarily include some of the people that are in our Head Start programs, right? Exactly. We have to be real. So I'm going to use the phrase, which is a phrase that's being used now. Let's normalize that every family does not necessarily operate like that. And so even when you said, let's have a conversation with the family, I know still
Right.
many families would be like, finish the statement with me. Stay
Right.
out,
Yep,
stay out my business.
exactly.
Right.
Mhm.
And so then when that happens, because it's gonna happen,
Yep,
let's think about now what our next statement is. Let's think about now what our next response could be. And so you just bringing it up to the family. Now, if you've already seen, let's just use a nice phrase of, let's use the phrase heightened movement and colorful words.
mhm,
You know what I mean? Coming out of the conversations that you hear as people are walking into the building or walking out of the building from some families or from out of the mouths of the babes.
mhm.
Of course, there's going to be a particular person who might take on the charge and say, I may have a relationship with the family
Right.
where I might be able to engage in this conversation, or maybe it may not be the teacher. Maybe it's the family community partnership team. Maybe it's the director. Of course, people are going to figure out real quick who's going to be the candidate to go do this, right? Am I saying anything that
Mhm.
sounds askew, right? No, I'm
Right.
probably not, because I know I lived through it even up until a couple months ago. So I knew families that I could chat with, and I'm like, you know what? That family and I, we don't necessarily vibe like that. Let me give that to my partner. Let me go to my colleague who has a better relationship. Or
Mhm.
let me give to another person in the building.
Right.
It could be the person at the front desk. It could be the safety agent who knows the family from around the block, and
Mhm.
they may be able to have that conversation. So I just wanted to sort of throw that back in our laps for a minute to say some of the statements are textbook. Now, the last thing that you said, and of course, this is I'm like giving the real look. I grew up in Flatbush,
Mhm.
born and bred. The way we run things
Mhm.
on Flatbush Avenue, on Church Avenue, on Nostrand Avenue, on Rogers Avenue.
In the 90s.
Okay, so
Right.
some things work well and some things don't. I just want us to sort of be conscious that there are a lot of things that we hear in the textbook, but then, now the last thing you said was about, oh, and let's say the parent, because sometimes and it may not be conscious, it may not be in the front of our mind, but
Right.
when you said
Parents.
the son, right, when you said the son
Mhm.
is doing the responding and it's about the father,
Mhm.
there are a lot of women who get picked up as well or who get
Right.
pointed. And
Exactly.
so even to step in and say, well, no,
Parent.
like, right, like, no, I know my parent did it. Like, I know my mom, whatever it was that the parent did. I know
Right.
they did it. Like, I saw them do it. I,
Mhm.
I saw the knife in the person's hand. I saw
Mhm.
the blood on the floor, like whatever it was.
Right. Right.
And so even for us to, I'm always the person that choose the words that you're going to use
Mhm.
before you get to the situation.
Mhm.
So you don't have, like how they say, stay ready so you don't have to get ready.
Yeah.
If we have these conversations now, then we're not blindsided and it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know what to say. At
Mhm.
least we tried to practice something. So at least we have something in our back pocket to say, well, wait a minute. Okay, I kind of went through this. It sounds like somebody thinks that the person in your house
Right.
is. And I know maybe you saw something or you heard something. We're gonna try to be helpful. Like, you just try to find the nicest words, because if
Words
it's
to
like,
say.
no, I know they did it.
Mhm.
They got caught. What do you say? What do
Right.
you
What do you say? Yeah.
right? What do you say? And so again, these conversations is just sort of go through the words of like, let's figure out what we are gonna say. Okay. Thank
Mhm.
you so much. Thank you. All right.
Yeah.
Now, we're here for 2 days. So even though if we may not get to everybody for everything, we're gonna spill some over tomorrow. Just saying. All right. So what's another room that wants to, now that I have my sound on, what's another room that wants to share out?
Room 3.
Yay. Come on, room 3. Hey, Miss Jasmine.
Hi, Miss Ariel.
I love your background. I may have to borrow that. Yes, Miss Jasmine. How we doing?
We're doing good. Okay, some responses that we got to the pandemic.
Okay.
we're going to present in forms of adjectives. So we're going to say depression, isolation, fear, anger, confusion, frustration, loneliness, lack of food, and financial strain. How was it traumatic for my group members? Emotional stress, worry, people's reaction towards you, especially if you're on the bus or the train and you cough, like right away you had something was wrong with you, yeah. So feeling helpless, and some coping strategies were staying away from the news. The news became very depressing. So some of us stayed away from the news. We binged on movies and series that made us feel better. Talking to loved ones and family members via video chat, the telephone, text messages. Painting, reading. Some of us developed new skills. We meditated, deep breathing, and learning relaxation skills. Some of us re-engaged in a hobby or activity that we had not done in a while. We seek therapy or counseling sessions. We also had some unhealthy coping, like overeating, yeah, drinking, alcohol, drugs. We overslept. We added more stress to us by overspending because, you know, we're going shopping to help us free our minds of the depression, but yet still we're adding more to ourselves because we have to replenish those funds that we're spending. And that became an issue. And some of us isolated ourselves, and that was not very healthy. So this was our contribution, breakout room 3.
Excellent.
Thank you.
I just want to know how many people are willing to say that they binge watch some series on Netflix or Hulu.
Yeah.
I need a thumbs up in the chat. I need a thumbs up because I know I see that a lot.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, room 3. Okay, let's get another room.
Okay, we are room 5, and it's actually the same team. It's just been the same from group 3. So I'm not gonna repeat myself. The only difference is that somebody really follow recipes from YouTube and cook and cook and cook. Okay. And it's like me was personally driving. I got in my car and drove all around New York City state, driving, listening to music. So, but mostly.
Oh, and I'm sure you were probably on the road by yourself during the early part.
All by myself. So by group 3, Miss Jasmine just reported, we almost exactly the same thing.
Wow. Okay, so I'm adding to my list. So driving, got it, driving and cooking.
So room 2. Breakout room 2. I just want to add to the things that were already mentioned. So group 2, we focused on good news, right? Stop listening to all the negative news. Pray. One person started going to church often and got involved in the church activities. Yeah. One of my colleagues bought board games and played with her daughter. Yeah, that was. And
I love it.
Another one said they took socially distanced walks in Prospect Park.
Shout out to Prospect Park. I was probably out there with.
And last but not least,
I live nearby.
Oh, you live nearby? Yeah, okay. Last but not least, I started exercising. So those are strategies that we employed during the pandemic to help us deal with this extraordinary situation that we were living under. Okay, and that's it for the contribution of group 2.
Oh, this is beautiful. Fabulous. Okay, so is there another group? How many other groups are? If you want to add on something that was not, I'm actually like crafting a compiled list. Say it again.
Group 4, did we go? I'm sorry, but I've been
That's
in and
okay.
out for a
Okay.
report. So I'm gonna ask my group 4 people to unmute yourself and to please chime in, because I have some notes, but in case you want to elaborate a little bit, my fellow group 4ians. So and please forgive me, but I was like in and out. So some of these things I may be repeating, okay? One of the things that we spoke about so far as strategies that we use during this pandemic was to like just totally unplug. I heard somebody say to stop looking at all of the bad news on TV. That also includes social media. Also keep talking about it with, you know, with other people. One of my co-workers stated that the more that it was spoke about, it started bringing back bad memories of people that she had lost during that time. It's okay to talk. So it was sort of a good thing and a bad thing, because you don't want to always talk about it, but sometimes you need that release. So, you know, I guess you can pick when you're going to talk about it and with whom you're going to talk about it too. Prayer, definitely. Meditation. And one of my co-workers brought up the fact that once we started going back out, they were a little fearful of taking the public transportation, the buses and the trains, because you don't know who has it. And also it seemed like the mental health part really affected a lot of people. So be very careful of your surroundings, whereas before, you know, you could walk down the street and you really don't have to keep looking over your shoulder, so to speak. But now, since everything was shut down and people was isolated, it seemed to have really brought the mental health issue, pushed it to the forefront. So you got to be real careful where you're going, and, you know, be fully aware of your surroundings.
Beautiful.
Did I forget anything, group 4? Sharita?
No, you didn't. You were spot on. You just, you know, just be mindful of your surroundings and your everyday comings and goings. You know, that's just basically it. But yeah, you did it.
Miss Mabel, Miss Loma, Miss Kerry,
Remember we were
Miss
saying,
Jasmine.
if you're on the train and you feel yourself in our ways, move to that next car.
Oh, I heard that statement that Miss Nelson, or I think it was you, that she said that she's on the train, and if she just feels like uncomfortable, either like someone earlier said, like coughing or sneezing or whatever, that door open, go to the next car. That door open, go to the next car. It's keep shifting, and that's okay. Younger people did that for fun, and people be like, oh, that's it. Now people like, no, I'm sorry, a little too much coughing going on in this car. I'm out. And that's okay. That's okay. I'm glad. So this is really, really critical. This is really critical. We're so focused on, let's make it okay for the children, right? The chancellor and the governor is like, everyone get back. Someone hasn't been on the train since February 2020. All right. I don't think I've been on the train either. But we're steady focusing on making it okay for the children. we're the ones that's showing up. Again, acknowledge where you are in this so that then you can have a little bit more compassion once you settle yourself for the parents who are going to come and share their own story and share their own actions and reactions. They're probably not even really focused on how the children, they're just like, oh, please get the kids back in the classroom, get them back to the teacher. But we at least need to make sure that we identify what's happening with us so that we can then say, well, if it's happening to me, it's happening to the child, but we just we need to look at how it's happening, what I'm seeing that may be different. All right, is there another group? I think there may be one other group.
Yeah, group 6.
Okay, come on, group 6.
Yes. Okay, so I know our recorder and reporter, I know Stacy has to walk away, but I'm gonna do with group 6, but please add if I forget anything. So our focus was on pandemic 2, and we decided to do this based on one of our group members' experience that, you know, her grandparents got affected with COVID, and she explained her situation, what she went through. After that, we had a discussion and we decided that as a strategy, we should be using mental and physical preparedness. That is very necessary to make us feel strong and do everything from hand. That's what I'm saying. Sanitary and sanitizing and cleaning practices, we had to learn from A, because, you know, I don't know what we were doing, but we had trainings and we had to learn, you know, we do from this and we started from there and we still have been doing it. And then avoid taking like traveling because of the, you know, crowdness and all that. But my situation is quite different. I see that Ms. Perez wrote that I haven't gotten on the train since February 2020. Okay, so and my situation, I have been traveling because you know, for work and other things too, because I don't drive. I have been taking buses and trains ever since August 2020. So, you know, I was only like 5 months in the house, and then I had to go out and get stuff, you know.
Okay.
Using the train. Then we also talked about positive reinforcement because, you know, situation like that, it makes you feel, you know, like isolated and, you know, you get depressed. So a lot of positive reinforcement, you know, the COVID patients or who feel depressed they need. And then we also said wellness check, make sure, you know, whoever get affected, call them. I did it personally because whoever I knew and I called them. And even if I didn't call them before, I mean, for some reason, I'm busy or anything, but I made sure that I called the person when I came to know the person got affected. So I did that. So and you know what, it's provided me like a strength. It gave me strength that, you know, just in case, you know, because you never know what's going to happen. So that was very, that was like very soothing for me to do that. And then we talked about, we have to make sure that we're going to talk to people about taking vaccine. Also very important for now. So that's why, you know, we said we're going to do that. And then some people express, some of our group members, they express how like them or their family got affected and how they were isolated, and then they had to break that isolation to come to the real world to, you know, do everything like normal. But just, you know, they had, so then again, that's also mental preparedness. And then another thing that I also did, because I went through a lot now with the people I know and at work also that we got affected, parents and stuff and all that. So I did prayer, a lot of prayer. So I know, I think ever since that, I do prayers. I mean, every single day I don't leave my house without prayer, but now after I go home, that evening prayer, it became like a practice for me now. So I do that now too. So that also gives me a lot of strength. And anything, group 6, if I missed anything, please join and complete, okay?
I am very just bowled over. I'm very excited to and feel a sense of a solace that people are naming the things that have impacted them, but also naming the strategies that they have sort of pulled out of their own, again, like their own back pocket or out of their own background, in order to help them, again, to help yourself. Because again, we're going to be, or if you already have children in your programs, you are now bombarded with a lot of additional versions of what, we all, are going through. And so again, if you don't settle yourself, all of these, 10, 15, 20, little bodies who are dealing with the same thing. And again, they're like the little chick looking around. Are you my mother? Are you the person? Are you the caregiver? Are you the caregiver that I can go to sort of put my head on your lap? If we're sitting down, like if we're at rug time, when someone snatches something from me, or if someone took my milk or whatever, won't let me play with the Legos, can I go run to you? Or are you just gonna be like, no, go figure that out? Go handle it. No, I need a word for it. I need a name for it. I need to be given some tool. It may not be some of the things that are on the list, but in essence, they are the mirrors of us. They are the mirrors. Again, 2 years ago, if we had this conversation, it'd be like, oh, okay, general stuff. We're all in this together. We're all in this together. Thank you so much for this. All right, we're going to, we have an hour left. I'm going to do maybe 3 more just like technical slides, and we'll do one other breakout case study, and then we're going to wrap this up. This is amazing. This is amazing. I hope you guys are feeling that this is helpful.
Yes, this is very helpful for me.
Hope you are. Good. Just and sharing the strategies, I'm going to see if I can actually type up this list and share it with you all when I share the presentations, because everyone needs to just have a lot of things that that are helpful. So this is a really, let me close this. This is Dr. Rita Pearson. Does anybody know who this person is? So this is Dr. Rita Pearson. She is an educator. She served the early child, the education world for many, many decades. You're going to hear about 3 minutes of her story. This is an excerpt from a TED Talk that she did some years back. And it's an example of us being advocates, of us being the people to stand in the gap for children while they are going through things, and how every single kid deserves a champion. I think this can play out. Here we go. Can you see it? Can someone turn the mic on and tell me, can you see the TED Talk?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. All righty. Whoops, way to go. No. That's what we're looking for. Well, sorry about that.
The experience of thousands of stores at your fingertips.
Here we go. Wait a minute, where did it just go?
One digital marketplace.
No. Pardon, I'm gonna get this separately.
One digital marketplace to find everything a business needs. Blow up your brand with templatemonster.com.
Dario?
I have
Yes.
spent my entire life.
Yes?
I just saw in the chat, group 7 didn't get a chance to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was calling. Okay. I'm let me play this video, and then group 7, you guys can pop in. I thought I was trying to give space for everyone to pop, to share. Sorry, group 7, but we'll come right back to you. Is that okay? Can someone hear me?
Vanessa?
Yes.
Yes, that's okay.
Okay, so group 7, as soon as I finish the video, then you guys will share, please. Okay.
Either at the schoolhouse, on the way to the schoolhouse, or talking about what happens in the schoolhouse. Both my parents were educators. My maternal grandparents were educators. And for the past 40 years, I've done the same thing. And so needless to say, over those years, I've had a chance to look at education reform from a lot of perspectives. Some of those reforms have been good. Some of them have been not so good. And we know why kids drop out. We know why kids don't learn. It's either poverty, low attendance, negative peer influences. We know why. But one of the things that we never discuss, or we rarely discuss, is the value and importance of human connection. Relationships. James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. George Washington Carver says all learning is understanding relationships. Everyone in this room has been affected by a teacher or an adult. For years, I have watched people teach. I have looked at the best and I've looked at some of the worst. A colleague said to me one time, they don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson. The kids should learn it. I should teach it. They should learn it. Case closed. Well, I said to her, you know, kids don't learn from people they don't like. She said, that's just a bunch of hooey. And I said to her, well, your year is going to be long and arduous, dear. Needless to say, it was. Some people think that you can either have it in you to build a relationship or you don't. I think Stephen Covey had the right idea. He said you ought to just throw in a few simple things, like seeking first to understand as opposed to being understood. Simple things like apologize. You ever thought about that? Tell a kid you're sorry, they're in shock. I taught a lesson once on ratios. I'm not real good with math, but I was working on it. And I got back and looked at that teacher edition. I taught the whole lesson wrong. So I came back to class the next day and I said, look, guys, I need to apologize. I taught the whole lesson wrong. I'm so sorry. I said, that's okay, Miss Pearson. You were so excited. We just let you go. I have had classes that were so low, so academically deficient that I cried. I wondered, how am I going to take this group in 9 months from where they are to where they need to be? And it was difficult. It was awfully hard. How do I raise the self-esteem of a child and his academic achievement at the same time? One year I came up with a bright idea. I told all my students, you were chosen to be in my class because I am the best teacher and you are the best students. They put us all together so we could show everybody else how to do it. One of the students said, really? I said, really? We have to show the other classes how to do it. So when we walk down the hall, people will notice us. So you can't make noise. You just have to strut. And I gave him a saying to say, I am somebody. I was somebody when I came. I'll be a better somebody when I leave. I am powerful and I am strong. I deserve the education that I get here. I have things to do, people to impress, and places to go. And they said, yeah. You say it long enough, it starts to be a part of you. And so, I gave a quiz, 20 questions. Student missed 18. I put a +2 on his paper and a big smiley face. He said, Miss Pearson, is this an F? I said, yes. He said, You got 2 right, you didn't miss them all. I said, and when we review this, won't you do better? He said, yes, ma'am, I can do better. You see, -18 sucks all the life out of you. +2 said I ain't all bad. For years, I watched my mother take the time at recess to review, go on home visits in the afternoon, buy combs and brushes and peanut butter and crackers to put in a desk drawer for kids that needed to eat, and a washcloth and some soap for the kids who didn't smell so good. See, it's hard to teach kids to stink. And kids can be cruel. And so she kept those things in her desk, and years later, after she retired, I watched some of those same kids come through and say to her, you know, Miss Walker, you made a difference in my life. You made it work for me. You made me feel like I was somebody when I knew at the bottom I wasn't. And I want you to just see what I've become. And when my mama died 2 years ago at 92, there were so many former students at her funeral. It brought tears to my eyes, not because she was gone, but because she left a legacy of relationships that could never disappear. Can we stand to have more relationships? Absolutely. Will you like all your children? Of course not. And you know your toughest kids are never absent. Never. You won't like them all, and the tough ones show up for a reason. It's the connection, it's the relationships. And while you won't like them all, the key is they can never, ever know. So teachers become great actors and great actresses, and we come to work when we don't feel like it, and we listen to policy that doesn't make sense, and we teach anyway. We teach anyway because that's what we do. Teaching and learning should bring joy. How powerful would our world be if we had kids who were not afraid to take risks, who were not afraid to think, and who had a champion? Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. Is this job tough? You betcha. Oh God, you betcha. But it is not impossible. We can do this. We're educators. We're born to make a difference. Thank you so much.
I wanted you to see that. If you've ever seen it before, for me, seeing it again, it's part and parcel. It's always just like a good a good meditation just to hear that and hear. And unfortunately, she passed away just a few years ago. But while she was on this earth, she was definitely the champion for us as educators. Even though she was speaking about sort of elementary, part and parcel of like doing home visits and sort of like again like having the. Thank you so much, Miss Jasmine. Thank you, Miss Sharita, for sharing that. Going on home visits when we used to in Head Start, when we used to go on actual home visits with families, or getting that like extra little soap and water or what have you, or the hairbrush or whatever, just to make sure that the child felt comfortable, because sometimes children come and they even don't feel comfortable, and we're trying to be supportive before someone else says something to them. So just wanted to share that with us. What was her name? Oh, her name is Dr. Rita Pearson. Dr. Rita Pearson. Thank you for asking. All right, so let's go back to our, here we go. All righty. I'm going to pass on this because we've done a lot of really great sharing. And group 7, actually, wait, group 7? Let me pause this. Group 7, I'm listening for you. Group 7, where are you at?
My name is Vanessa Wilson. I was a part of Group 7. I'm just going to share a little bit of information, and whoever else wants to chip in can chip in. Our topic was death. It could be due to the pandemic or just death in general, and how children cope with that. Some children understand what death means and some don't, especially in the earlier age. They'll feel like the person took a vacation or they're going to return. And after a while, when they realize, like, how come I didn't see grandma, or how come cousin didn't come over, then they realize that that person is never going to return, even though they may have attended the funeral. In their mind, they didn't receive the information that being dead is someone that they won't see again.
Okay.
We discussed having the discussion with them before someone passes away, but that can never have the same effect of when it actually happens, because that trauma that they feel or the pain that they feel in that moment, you can explain that to someone.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Yes. Yes. So it will not be the afterthought in the conversations about transitioning. But we have to be prepared with the conversation. And so having the conversations now is better than having the conversations when it happens and everybody is, all pressed for time and to, handle the services, and children are kind of just like, go play, left to the side, or, go in your room. Like, this is grown folks conversation, but, the sharing of pictures or the sharing of a special, like, an outfit or something that person has. Yeah. Children like to sort of smell that smell. I'm just, thinking of things, of course, after the fact, of what had, if I was able to do it differently, years ago, of how to incorporate them more, even though we think that they're not connected. Of course, they're connected. So we shouldn't just say because they quote unquote can't pay any bills and can't make any arrangements that they don't have any say, right? Anybody else from group 7 that want to add on? Was there anything else that should be shared for the group? Okay. All right. Here we go. Okay, I'm actually gonna hit I'm gonna go to like a little technical information. So here, and we kind of actually talked about this in the sharing. So here are some effects of exposure to trauma, and these are developmental effects. So there is an impact of chronic, let me put this in presentation mode, the effect of chronic childhood trauma, smaller brain size and structures, difficulty identifying. And if you want to give a head nod or, write in the chat 1 or 2 of the phrases that you may see that you have already either experienced or you've had experience with, or that you've seen in maybe children in your family or children in your classroom or children in your neighborhood. Difficulty identifying, expressing, and managing feelings. I see that a lot. Extreme emotional responses ranging from anxiety and anger to feeling numb and disconnected. Increased behavioral issues and risk-taking behaviors such as self-harm. We talked about this earlier, in substance abuse. Difficulty trusting others and forming healthy relationships. Low self-esteem and poor self-image. Difficulty with attention, learning, and memory. Increased learning difficulties, referrals to special education, and likelihood of failing a grade. More frequent suspensions, expulsions, and time out of class. Increased risk for mental and physical health issues, and increased risk for system involvement. Here are some developmental effects. I'll let you just give space for you to read this on your own. I don't have to read everything. I want to add into this, if you've taken a look at these 3 developmental effects, Over the past two, I don't know why, but over the past 2 days, I've been driving through some spaces, and I have seen uh, older people, males and females, and I know biologically they are not as old as they look. Some of you might start thinking, who do I see in my neighborhood, or maybe the community that around where I work, or communities that I travel through. Even if you're on the train or on the bus, you'll see people on the train, you'll see people on the bus, you'll see people like sort of like on the side of the road. And if you've been in a community long enough, and these people are in your community, I've seen about 4 people in my community, and I've lived in my community literally all my life. I've seen them, and I said, I remember when, I remember being a younger person and seeing you, let's just say, live your best life. Some of you know what I mean. Well, they were living their best life then, but now they look 30 years older than what they really should look like. Some of the people that I've seen around the way, they're on the street corner. They look like they've, sort of unrealistically just rolled out of, from behind the building. Clothes, ragged, clear stress and anxiety on their faces, hair that has not been, let's say, attended to, coverings on their feet that they look like they walked through mud. And I'm saying, wait, I remember you. Back in the day, we would say, oh, maybe I'm a Flatbush person. So we would say, we would mention a building, and it was the G building. If anybody knows the G building, turn your mic on and let me know what the G building is.
For the people who are mentally ill. When I first came here,
Yes. Kings County G building.
Right, there we go. Again, right. So I'm a Brooklyn girl. So I'm a Flatbush girl. So we're referring to Kings County Hospital. Kings County Hospital. No matter what, no matter what you say about Kings County Hospital, it has the best pediatric trauma care center in the state. The best. The other parts may have some issues, but trauma center, the best. So, and I've seen, people would say, oh, maybe they just, and it was a word thrown around, but oh, maybe they just came out of the G building. Again, a place where people that had mental anxiety to a heightened extent would be. But for whatever reason, if they not aged out, but if they finished their treatment and they were let out, usually we would see them back on the street, and we would say, boy, they done got out a little too soon. Now, whatever the situation is, so many people who have experienced trauma and who are living in their trauma are within us. But now trauma is broadened. And so whether or not we're holding it together, and again, I'm saying we, the adults, but our children, we're almost expecting them to hold it together. Remind yourself, you are barely having a hard time holding it together. Whether we binge watched, whether we visited Baskin Robbins or Haagen-Dazs, whether we had Amazon drop-offs at our door every other day. I mean, Amazon and UPS have been doing overtime over the last year and a half because of what we're doing. You're cooking a whole lot. I'm just looking back at at the notes. You're coming up with all these hobbies. Maybe you were sleeping a lot, whatever. But we were experiencing it. Just don't take away that for some of our children, for some of us, we could be just a couple of steps away. So let's be kind to each other going through this. Let's be kinder to our children, to these children who we're trying to care for as they're going through this. Because if you looked at these 3 points, again, toxic stress, the exposure to the traumatic situations, the how it continues through adolescence, dealing with self-regulation, behavior, cognition, relationships, self-concept, all of these studies are showing up right now on our faces, even though, again, some of these things were written about in 2001, 2005, 6, 12, 16. We're living through it today. The long-term effects, it can change the person's perception of themselves and others by challenging their views that the world is a safe place. We have a lot of people that feel like, listen, I would rather try to go somewhere else, maybe move to another state, a country. Some people want to leave the planet altogether. We can't just sort of throw them, not throw them away, but like say, oh, you're not serious. At this point, believe people when they say stuff. Believe people when they say things. If we're not expecting anybody to save anyone or to be the answer for everyone, of course, because we cannot put the superhero cape. We're going to see a superhero cape in a few moments. We can't expect people to be like the superheroes for everyone, but at least to stand there and look them in the eye and just listen for as for the time that you can. And when it's time for you to say that you're overloaded with listening, like be at peace, give your head nod or or however you're going to figure out how to exit stage left or stage right. Of course, making sure the person is in a safe space. But you can only take so much.
Yeah.
We can, as individuals, we can only take so much. So why are we using a trauma-informed care approach? Because it'll provide early childhood teachers and educators awareness that some behaviors such as social withdrawal, anger, or the opposite of social withdrawal, hypersociality, can be expressions of early childhood trauma that call for opportunities to heal rather than behavioral correction. So it's not like you got to stop doing that, but let's attempt to add 3 or 4 more seconds on top of that lens and say, I wonder what might be the trigger and how can I do what? Add a strategy so that the child has, or the person has something else to tap into instead of just manifesting what we consider a negative behavior or a harmful behavior, because negative to one is not negative to others. So the child is not only defined by the trauma they experienced. Sometimes in being responsive to children, we develop a single narrative about a child. Remember the whole thing about the boy, and it's not a single narrative. It's not like the boy acting out because the father has, gone through some legal stuff. It could be anyone. Their education then becomes a response to the singular part of their story and no longer educates the whole child. The education must be emotionally attuned to their students, be uniquely aware of their own emotions. That's what I'm trying to get us to do. Let's be aware of our own emotions and the boundaries so that we then can look at the other person, in this situation, the child, to try to help and be as responsive to that person versus reacting. Here's our little superheroes. We have resiliency building superpowers. We're given a daily platform to help identify, address, and rehabilitate behaviors based on our own additional individual experiences. Remember, like if your family always said, hey, what happens in the house stays in the house, and then you hear a child say stuff that happened in the house, but they're really trying to heal, they're trying to say, I need help. If they go say, hey, I hear let's say my parents argue, or I hear crashing, or I hear people throwing things, or I see people throwing up hands. Some people know what I'm talking about, throwing up hands, and you say, well, you're not supposed to talk about that. Or the family says, if you share it with the family and the family says, oh, that's our business, dad, our business. Like, what are you supposed to do? But you have to at least give space for that child to share what it is that they're going through, especially if they just start talking. You don't tell them, well, don't tell me, because then what's going to happen? Remember, we talked about this earlier. They are not going to trust adults. They are going to be silent, and they're going to keep all that stuff bottled up. And later on in life, it is going to come out. It is going to come out. So educators can create learning and growing environments that teach and nurture the whole child. So here are 5 basic principles to build resiliency. There's safety, choice, collaboration, trustworthiness, and empowerment. Ensuring physical and emotional safety. Individual has choice and control. Making decisions with the individual and sharing power. Task clarity, consistency, and interpersonal boundaries. And prioritizing empowerment and skill building. And I'm going to share this presentation with you when we probably tomorrow. So I'm going to continue through the presentation. So here's practice. So here are actually a few different case studies. We'll probably just do one right now in order to see how we can take, let me go back. these trauma-informed care in daily practice, these 5 principles, how can we use these 5 principles in case study? So I'm going to go look at a case study. I'm going to read one of them. I think that's the best way to do it. And then I'll keep this slide up so that you see how you can use some of these principles in the case study and trying to come up with a strategy. So just like you came up with strategies about things that traumatic situations that you've been through yourself or that you've seen in your family or school or community, we're going to take a look at some case studies that, you probably say like, man, did they get this case study from my classroom? Because I've been through this. All right, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's say a child who has lost a parent to COVID. Hold on, I'm gonna see if I can look at another one. Essential worker, attachment. Okay, I'm gonna go with this one. A child whose parent is an essential worker. Okay, think about it. A child whose parent is an essential worker. Clearly, this is probably one of a case study that we've all went through, especially when we first had the centers open back up, and the essential worker families were probably one of the first ones to be at the door, like early in the morning. Like, listen, I have to get back to work. Like my child has to be in childcare, even though for most of the city or the state, they have said, well, we're open, but what, they were like 5 or 6. Because I remember having these conversations with some of you in the spring where you may have only had 6 children or 7 children. They weren't coming all the time. So the child whose parent is an essential worker, how can you be emotionally attuned to the child? What specific issues might the child bring up, or related phrases they might say, or actions they might mimic or act out? As educators, how can you be uniquely aware of your own emotions and boundaries in this setting? I think we at least tapped into that earlier today. And how can you use trauma-informed education to provide experiences responsive to the needs of a child with this experience? Now, currently it's 12:38, well, on my clock. If I give 10 minutes, maybe like 7 minutes, if I give 7 minutes, so I'll come back at like say 12:45, we'll take a look at giving some thought about this and sharing some ideas. How can we be emotionally attuned to the child? Specific issues the child may bring up. How can we be aware of our own emotions? And how can we use trauma-informed education to provide experiences responsive to the needs? Like, how can we use what we know about these principles to help the child with this situation? So I'm going to come out of this and go to, just go. So as we are wrapping up and discussing our trauma-informed care and seeing it in the daily practice, using it in the case study of a child whose parent is an essential worker. Some of you mentioned, safety and making sure that the space is a safe space. Using trustworthiness and empowerment, again, like making sure it's a safe space that the child knows and the family knows in our Head Start programs that, let's say, even though the one onset is what happens in the household, let's say stays in the household, but realistically what is shared within the Head Start community or within the classroom or the building is within a safe range, so that whatever is shared, it will be listened to, it will be acknowledged. We will, as I like to say, I will get the appropriate people to help and support in this situation. And let's try to move to the next step together. Keep in mind that you don't want to burn yourself out, because in our work as essential workers, because we are essential workers, we tend to think that like we wear the superhero cape, but as we're wearing the superhero cape, then we're quote unquote supposed to take on everything. We're not supposed to take on everything. I'm not trained as a psychotherapist. I'm not. So when it gets a little deeper than what I can actually say and share logistically and legally, I'm going to say lovingly. I say to you, this is this is outside of my wheelhouse, right? I'm not trained in that. But I will say to the person who's hurting, allow me to get someone else where they know how to help better than I can. And that's fair. That's fair. You don't want to give the building of a house to a baker. You don't want to give the birthing of a baby to an electrician. You don't want to give a swim instructor, a car to fix.
We have some responses in the chat.
Well, thank you, because I'm just now copying over to the chat. Thank you, Miss Jasmine. All right, so let's see. Okay, so Miss Jasmine said helping them identify how they feel, which can help them understand themselves and others, providing boundaries. Yes, the boundaries. Boundaries and expectations for behavior can help children feel safe, and noticing when they have done a good job builds self-worth and self-confidence. Thank you so much, Miss Jasmine. Miss Beverly, child anxious or overly sensitive, empowerment. Thank you, Miss Beverly. Miss Jasmine, again, the authenticity of how we respond when our child is overwhelmed plays a big role in how safe and understood the child feels. Yes, Miss Jasmine. And be Acosta as a family assistant that's not in the classroom, I can be consistently pleasant. Yes, and let them know I see that. Listen, I can't say enough about our, I'll just say our out of classroom staff. And so I'm talking about the person who opens the door early in the morning, the person, the people who answer the phone, our custodial staff who sees the children actually doing things that sometimes the teachers don't see, right? They actually will see the things like the parents that drop off and pick up. And they, I like to say ear hustlers, they're eye hustlers. Like they're the ones that are looking when people don't think that they're looking, and they can actually feed into us who are in the classroom or doing other things. Well, let me just say, I saw, Miss So-and-so as they were dropping off. I haven't seen them like irate, but they were irate this morning. They may be the person sort of give you that little heads up so that before you go thrust a question, you may want to dial it back a little bit before you go, you know, with a deep question that may sort of knock them off kilter. To our kitchen staff, all of the Head Start family that is within the building, we are all in this together. So if you are still here in the room, if you're still here in this conversation, every single person's eyes and ears, and even that sixth sense that people will say, like, I got a feeling. Share that feeling, because that feeling is now resonated to an extent that what was the tiny little drop in the pond that gave a little ripple is now a wave. And what are we going to do about that wave? What kind of tools are we now adding to our in our pocket or to our pouch, that when stuff shows up and we don't realize what it is, now at least we can say, is it related to what's going on right now, or is it just the routine developmental stages? Thank you. The classroom routines can provide the child with some normalcy despite the parent's schedule. When the family can't get them to sleep because a lot of stuff is going on, we put on that music, or we start saying your rest poem or your rest story. They at least know, if I can't sleep at home, at least I know there's a cot, a chair, or a table I can lay my head on to get some rest here, right? And that's part of what this conversation is about. How are we responding to the trauma that children are going through? I want to say 1,000 thank yous to everyone who has been in the room today. We are at the end, and clearly there are still 59 cameras that are engaged. Let me say that. So I really, really thank you for your presence and your attention today. I want to say that we will meet here again, and we will meet at the 10 o'clock time. We'll be speaking tomorrow about Ursia in this situation, and how how we're getting bodies in seats, keeping them in seats, and making sure they come on a regular basis and are engaged on a regular basis. That's going to be our focus for our conversation tomorrow. And that for today is it. Thank you, Miss Francine. I see your comment. I appreciate it. If there's one word that's a takeaway, one word, if you can drop it in the chat so I could at least just sort of assess, is it too much, too little? Did I step on any toes? Did anyone say ouch? Did anyone say, ooh, like, you kind of hit where it hurt, or thanks for holding space? Or you can drop it in the chat if you're not interested in sharing it. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So Miss Doria,
Yes, ma'am.
I want to thank you on behalf of Dr. Council and the staff here at PAL that you always come with topics that are relevant.
Thank you, Ms. Nurse.
And this was really a right now training, so very important. And what I really enjoyed about the training today was the engagement, the ability to be able to reflect and then communicate, about trauma-informed care. I could hear, how all of this, the staff, the participation and giving them the opportunity to be involved and reflect and to talk to one another. And sometimes we don't have that. And I see, Miss Ebony, she used the word relatable, and I really do like that word. It was so relatable, and engaging and interactive. You always seem to, find ways to help us to use our voice and lend our thoughts to the conversation. And I appreciate that about you as a trainer and as a person and as one who is, in the space with adult learners. So thank you. We appreciate you. Look forward to tomorrow.
Excellent. So
yes.
I'm going to say this, that tomorrow I'm looking for two things. I'm looking for a word or a phrase or a sentence that could be reposted. So for those of you who are on social media, I'm looking for hashtags.
Okay.
Right? I'm looking for hashtags. Somebody's just popping back in. I'm looking for either a hashtag or something that I can quote. So the person that said, let me go back to it. The Miss Nurse who said, if the children don't like you, they won't learn from you. That's quotable, right? That's something that it may be one little tiny word or phrase that comes from the situation. Because literally, when I, let's say, go to report out and do what I have to do after this, and people say, well, what do they take from it? Well, if someone were to remember, well, if they don't like you, they won't learn from you. That sort of sums it up. So those of you who are like social media heads like I am, if there's a relatable hashtag tomorrow, let's drop those into the chat, or something that would be that one takeaway. If someone's like, man, like, what'd you get from that? And the one thing is, like, if they don't like you, they won't learn from you. Probably right. So I thank you so much.
Miss Ratner quoted Rita Pearson by saying, educators are born to make things happen.
Yeah. Not everybody could be an educator. Some people, of course, we already had this conversation before. People think, the doctors and the lawyers are like, those are the greatest things since sliced bread. Nope. Because without us,
True indeed.
They would not be.
True indeed.
Peace and blessings.
Thank you.
I'll see you all tomorrow.